The cabin stood defiant against the California sky, every log notched and fitted by hands that had refused all charity. And Helena Turner stepped back to admire what 6 months of solitary labor had built, while the sun painted the Sierra Nevada foothills gold behind her. She wiped sweat from her brow with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of dirt across her forehead. The structure was not large, perhaps 16 feet by 20, but it was solid and true. Each wall rose straight, the roof was tight, and the door she had hung just that morning swung on hinges she had bartered for with 3 deer hides in Winnetka. The small town sat 5 miles down the mountain, close enough for supplies but far enough that she could breathe without the weight of judgment pressing against her chest. Helena was 23 years old in this summer of 1872, and she had built her home with her own 2 hands because no one else would do it without strings attached. The men in town had offered help, certainly, but their eyes carried expectations she would not meet. Her late father had taught her carpentry before fever took him 2 years prior, and her mother had passed when Helena was just a girl of 7. She had no siblings, no husband, and no desire to acquire the latter simply for the sake of having lumber raised. The land was hers, 40 acres purchased with money saved from years of sewing and washing clothes for the miners and merchants. It was rough country, dotted with oak and pine, with a creek running clear and cold through the western portion. She had chosen the building site carefully, on a slight rise with good drainage and a view of the mountains that made her heart feel less confined. She walked the perimeter of the cabin one more time, checking the chinking between the logs, testing the strength of the corners. Everything held firm. Tomorrow she would begin work on the furniture, a simple bed frame and table. She already had a chair, one she had brought in the wagon along with her tools, her clothes, and the rifle that now leaned against the cabin wall. The sound of hooves on the rocky trail brought her head up sharply. She was not expecting visitors, and isolated as she was, any arrival brought a spike of wariness. Helena moved toward the rifle with casual purpose, not touching it but standing close enough that the gesture was clear. The rider who emerged from the tree line sat easy in his saddle, a tall man on a bay horse that looked trail-worn but well cared for. He removed his hat as he approached, revealing dark hair that needed cutting and a face that was honest in its angles. He appeared to be perhaps 25 or 26, with eyes that were a startling blue against his sun-darkened skin. "Miss Turner," he called out, stopping his horse a respectful distance away. "I am," she replied, her voice steady. "You have me at a disadvantage." "Name is Aaron Lawson, madam. I have the property about 3 miles south of here, down where the creek widens out." He gestured vaguely in that direction. "Heard in town that someone had taken up the old Peterson claim. Thought I would ride over and introduce myself, seeing as we are neighbors now." Helena studied him carefully. He did not have the look of the men who had bothered her in Winnetka, the ones whose offers of help came with leering undertones. His posture was relaxed, his hands visible on the saddle horn, and his horse stood quiet beneath him. She had learned to read men the way her father had taught her to read wood grain, looking for the flaws that would cause a break under pressure. "I appreciate the courtesy, Mr. Lawson," she said, softening her stance slightly but not moving away from the rifle. "As you can see, I am settling in." His eyes traveled over the cabin, and she saw genuine surprise register on his features. "You built this yourself?" "I did." "That is fine work," he said, and there was no condescension in his tone, only honest admiration. "Your corner notches are cleaner than mine, and I have been building since I was a boy." Despite herself, Helena felt a small bloom of pride. "My father was a carpenter. He believed his daughter should know how to build as well as any son." Aaron nodded slowly. He taught you well." He shifted in his saddle, and his horse took a single step forward before he checked it. "I do not mean to intrude on your time, Miss Turner. I only wanted to let you know that if you need anything, anything at all, my place is not far. I run cattle, but I keep a good garden and my chickens lay more eggs than I can eat." "That is kind of you," Helena said and meant it. "I will keep it in mind." He replaced his hat, tipping it to her. "I will leave you to your evening then. Welcome to the mountain, Miss Turner." She watched him turn his horse and ride back the way he had come, disappearing into the lengthening shadows beneath the pines. When he was gone, she let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. The encounter had been brief and proper, and yet something about Aaron Lawson lingered in her mind. Perhaps it was the way he had looked at her cabin with respect rather than skepticism. Perhaps it was simply that he had offered help without demanding anything in return. Helena shook her head and turned back to her work. She had not come to this mountain to think about men, cowboy or otherwise. She had come to build a life that was entirely her own. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. She rose with the sun and worked until dark, building furniture, clearing land for a garden, reinforcing the cabin against the winter that would come. She saw no one, though occasionally she heard cattle lowing in the distance and knew that Aaron Lawson was somewhere on the mountain tending his herd. 2 weeks after finishing the cabin, Helena stood in her doorway at dawn and considered her next project. She needed a barn. The small shed she had constructed was barely adequate for her tools and the supplies she had brought from town. She wanted chickens, perhaps a milk cow, and definitely a horse. The walk to Winnetka was manageable but tedious, and winter would make it treacherous. She had the timber marked already, trees she had chosen for their straightness and size. A barn would require more lumber than the cabin, and it would require it to be raised higher. She was strong, but she was also practical. Some of the beams would be at the very limit of what she could manage alone. Still, she had managed the cabin. She would manage the barn. Helena spent that morning felling the first tree, a tall pine that crashed down exactly where she had intended. The sound echoed across the mountain, and she felt the impact through the soles of her boots. She was limbing the trunk when she heard hooves again. This time she recognized the rider immediately. Aaron Lawson approached at a walk, and in the morning light she could see him more clearly than she had at dusk during his first visit. He was handsome in the way of men who worked outdoors, all lean muscle and sun-weathered skin. He wore a simple shirt and vest, work clothes rather than town clothes, and his hat was stained with sweat and dust. "Miss Turner," he greeted, dismounting before he got too close. He led his horse the last few yards, another gesture of respect that she noted. "I heard the tree fall and thought I would check that everything was all right." "Everything is fine," she assured him, resting her axe against the fallen trunk. "I am starting on a barn." His eyebrows rose. "A barn? That is ambitious work for one person." "I built the cabin alone," she reminded him. "You did, and it is impressive. But a barn is different. The beams have to be raised higher, and some of those ridge poles will be heavy even for 2 people. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I am not trying to tell you what you can or cannot do, Miss Turner. I am only thinking about safety. If a beam falls wrong when you are alone, there is no one to help." Helena felt her jaw tighten. She had heard variations of this concern before, always from men who thought a woman should not be doing such work at all. And yet, when she looked at Aaron Lawson, she did not see the same judgment. His expression was earnest, almost worried. "I appreciate your concern," she said, keeping her voice level, "but I have made it this far on my own." "You have," he agreed, "and I respect that more than I can say, but let me ask you something. If our positions were reversed, If I were building alone and you knew that one person was not truly enough for the job at hand, would you not offer to help?" She opened her mouth to respond, and then closed it again. He had a point, one that her pride did not want to acknowledge but her practical nature could not deny. "I do not want charity," she said finally. "It is not charity if I want to help," Aaron replied. "And it is not charity if you are doing me a favor in return. What favor would I be doing you?" He smiled then, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. "Miss Turner, I have been eating my own cooking for 3 years. If you would trade me a few decent meals for labor, I would count myself ahead in the bargain." Despite herself, Helena felt a smile tug at her own lips. "You are saying your cooking is that bad. I am saying that my biscuits could be used as building materials, and not in a good way." She laughed, the sound surprising her with its spontaneity. When was the last time someone had made her laugh? She could not remember. "Let me build the barn," Aaron said, his voice gentle but serious now. "Or at least let me help you build it. You can supervise every board if you like. You can tell me exactly how you want it done. But let me do the heavy lifting, the parts where a second pair of hands makes the difference between safe and dangerous." Helena looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for any hidden motive, any sign that his help came with expectations she could not meet. She found none. His offer seemed genuine, and more than that, it seemed practical. She was not foolish enough to risk injury out of stubborn pride. "Meals and nothing more," she said firmly. "You help me build the barn and I will feed you while you work. That is the bargain." "That is the bargain," he agreed, extending his hand. She took it, feeling the calluses on his palm that matched her own. His grip was firm but brief, and when he released her hand, he stepped back to a proper distance. "When do you want to start?" he asked. "As soon as possible. I need the barn finished before the first snow." "Then we will start tomorrow," Aaron said. "I will bring my tools and my work horse. She is good for hauling timber." He mounted his bay and rode off with another tip of his hat, leaving Helena standing beside her fallen tree, wondering what exactly she had just agreed to. That evening, as she prepared a simple dinner of beans and cornbread, she found herself thinking about Aaron Lawson more than was probably wise. He was a neighbor offering help, nothing more. She had accepted because it made practical sense, not because she wanted his company. And yet, she could not deny that the prospect of having someone to talk to during the work was not entirely unwelcome. The solitude she had sought so fiercely had been good for her soul, but it had also been lonely in ways she had not anticipated. She went to bed that night in her cabin, lying on the bed frame she had built with her own hands, and listened to the wind moving through the pines. Tomorrow would bring a change to her carefully constructed independence. She was not sure whether to feel relieved or wary. Aaron arrived at dawn, as promised. He brought his work horse, a sturdy mare with a patient eye and a wagon loaded with additional tools. He also brought a sack of coffee beans and a loaf of bread that looked store-bought. "Thought you might appreciate some coffee," he said as he unloaded. "And the bread is from Mrs. Chen in Winnetka. She runs the boarding house and bakes better than anyone in 3 counties." Helena accepted both offerings with thanks, and they set to work. She showed him where she wanted the barn, a level spot near the cabin with good access to the creek. She had already laid out the dimensions with stakes and string, and Aaron walked the perimeter, nodding his approval. "This is a good site," he said. "Drainage is right, and you will not have to haul water far for the animals." They spent the morning cutting timber, working in a companionable rhythm that surprised Helena with its ease. Aaron was skilled with an axe, his strokes clean and powerful, and he had an eye for selecting the right trees. When they stopped for lunch, Helena served the stew she had made the night before, thick with vegetables from Winnetka and venison she had shot herself. Aaron ate with evident appreciation, and when he had finished, he leaned back against the cabin wall with a contented sigh. "Miss Turner, if you cook like this regularly, I may end up building you a second barn just for an excuse to stay." She felt heat rise in her cheeks, both from the compliment and from the implication that he enjoyed her company. "It is only stew," she said, busying herself with cleaning the dishes. "It is the best stew I have had in years," he countered. "You are being modest." They worked through the afternoon, and as the sun began to lower, Aaron showed no signs of leaving. Helena realized that he must have ridden up before first light to arrive at dawn, which meant he had a long ride back ahead of him. "You should head back while you still have daylight," she said, wiping sawdust from her arms. "I will," he agreed, "but I was thinking, if it would not be an imposition, I could bring my bedroll tomorrow and camp here while we work. It would save travel time and we could get more done each day." Helena hesitated. Having him work alongside her during the day was one thing. Having him camp on her property was another. And yet, his reasoning was sound, and she could not deny that the barn would be finished much faster with full days of work. "You can camp by the creek," she said finally. "There is a good spot beneath the big oak, flat ground and close to water." "That will do perfectly," Aaron said. "Thank you, Miss Turner. You should call me Helena," she said, surprising herself. "If we are going to be working together for weeks, formality seems excessive." His smile was warm. "Then you should call me Aaron." That night, after he had ridden away, Helena sat on the step of her cabin and watched the stars emerge. She felt the change happening, the careful walls she had built around herself beginning to develop cracks. Aaron Lawson was kind and respectful and easy to be around, and that made him dangerous in a way that the leering men in town had never been. She could protect herself from obvious threats. It was the subtle ones, the ones that crept in through kindness and laughter, that worried her. The next morning, Aaron arrived with his bedroll, a pack of supplies and a determination that matched her own. They worked steadily, felling timber, stripping bark, cutting beams to length. Helena directed the work, and Aaron followed her plans without question, though he occasionally offered suggestions that she found herself considering and often accepting. By the end of the first week, they had all the timber cut and were beginning to lay the foundation. Aaron proved to be as skilled at stonework as he was at carpentry, and together they built a solid base for the barn walls. They fell into an easy routine. Helena cooked breakfast and dinner, substantial meals that Aaron praised with genuine enthusiasm. He brought supplies from his own stores, refusing to let her bear the full burden of feeding him. In the evenings, after the work was done, they would sit by his campfire near the creek and talk. Helena learned that Aaron had come to California from Missouri 5 years earlier, seeking land and opportunity. He had worked as a ranch hand before saving enough to buy his own property. He ran a small herd of cattle, selling beef in Winnetka and occasionally driving stock to larger markets in Sacramento. He was 26 years old, had never been married, and had a sister back in Missouri who wrote him long letters that he answered irregularly. In turn, she told him about her father, about learning carpentry and hunting and all the skills that most women were never taught. She told him about the men in Winnetka who had offered help that was not really help at all, and about her determination to build a life that was hers alone. "I understand that," Aaron said one evening, poking at the fire with a stick. "The wanting to stand on your own, but I hope you know that accepting help does not make you weak." "I know that," Helena said, though she was not entirely sure she believed it. "But I also know that help often comes with conditions." "Not from me," Aaron said, meeting her eyes across the flames. I am helping you because I want to, because I admire what you are doing, and because I enjoy your company. That is all." She wanted to believe him. More than that, she was beginning to realize that she did believe him. Aaron had been nothing but honorable in all their interactions. He kept his camp separate from her cabin. He never touched her beyond the occasional brush of hands when they were working. He treated her as an equal, valuing her opinions and respecting her decisions. And yet, she could feel something building between them, a current that ran beneath their words and flowed through their shared silences. It frightened her, this feeling, because it represented a vulnerability she had sworn to never allow again. The barn began to take shape. They raised the walls over the course of 3 days, Aaron doing the heavy lifting while Helena guided the beams into place. It was hard, satisfying work, and when the final wall was upright, they both stood back to admire it. "We make a good team," Aaron said, and there was something in his voice that made Helena's heart beat faster. "We do," she agreed, not looking at him. The roof was next, and it was the most dangerous part of the construction. They worked carefully, Aaron insisting that Helena tie herself off with rope whenever she was more than a few feet off the ground. She chafed at the precaution, but understood the wisdom of it. One afternoon, as they were positioning a ridge beam, Aaron's foot slipped on the framework. He caught himself quickly, but for a heart-stopping moment, Helena saw him teetering, saw the long drop to the ground below. "Aaron," she shouted, dropping her end of the beam and reaching for him. He steadied himself, gripping the frame with white-knuckled hands. "I am all right," he said, his voice tight. "I am all right." But Helena was shaking, the image of him falling playing over and over in her mind. When they climbed down for a break, her legs were unsteady beneath her. "That was foolish of me," Aaron said, sitting heavily on a stump. "I was not paying attention." "You could have been killed," Helena said, and her voice came out sharper than she intended. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw understanding dawn in his eyes. "Helena," he said softly, "I am fine." "I know," she said, but her hands were still trembling. Aaron reached out and took one of her hands in both of his. The gesture was gentle, comforting, and Helena did not pull away. They sat like that for a long moment, his calloused hands warm around hers, and something shifted between them. "I care about you," Aaron said quietly. "I think you know that." Helena looked at their joined hands, at the sawdust on his sleeves and the honest concern in his eyes. "I know," she whispered. "I do not want to push you," he continued. "I know you value your independence, and I respect that. But I also cannot keep pretending that working beside you every day, talking with you every evening, has not made me feel things I did not expect to feel." She raised her eyes to his face. "What things?" "I think I am falling in love with you," Aaron said simply, "and I needed you to know." Helena's breath caught in her chest. She had known on some level that this was coming. She had felt the pull between them growing stronger with each passing day, but hearing him say it aloud made it real in a way that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. "I did not come here looking for love," she said. "I came here to be alone." "I know," Aaron said. "And if you want me to finish this barn and then leave you in peace, I will do that. I will ride away and never bother you again. But if there is any chance at all, that you might feel even a fraction of what I feel, then I am asking you to consider letting me stay. Not just to build a barn, Helena, to build a life. With you." She looked at him, this cowboy who had ridden into her world and somehow slipped past all her defenses. She thought about the weeks they had spent working together, the easy companionship, the laughter, the moments of understanding that needed no words. She thought about how her cabin felt less lonely when he was near, how the mountain seemed less vast when she could share it with someone who understood why she loved it. "I am afraid," she admitted. I am afraid of needing someone. I am afraid of what happens if I let you in and then you leave." "I am not going to leave," Aaron said. "Not unless you tell me to go." "You cannot promise that," Helena said. "Life is uncertain, people die, people change." "You are right," Aaron acknowledged. "I cannot promise that nothing bad will ever happen. But I can promise that I will be beside you through whatever comes. I can promise that I will respect you, partner with you, and love you for as long as I draw breath. That is all anyone can promise, Helena, and it is what I am offering you now." She closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face and the solid weight of his hands around hers. For so long, she had believed that strength meant standing alone, but perhaps true strength was knowing when to stand beside someone instead. "I think I am falling in love with you too," she said, opening her eyes, "and it terrifies me." Aaron's face broke into a smile that was pure joy. "We can be terrified together," he said, and then he was kissing her, soft and tentative at first, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Helena did not pull away. Instead, she leaned into him, her hands coming up to his shoulders, and kissed him back with all the longing she had been trying to deny. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Aaron rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he murmured. "So have I," Helena admitted. They finished the barn roof over the next few days, working with renewed energy and frequent stolen kisses. The structure was solid and spacious, with room for animals and storage and a small tack area. When the final shingle was nailed in place, they climbed down and stood together, arms around each other, admiring their work. "She built her cabin by herself with no help," Aaron said softly. "But the cowboy said, 'Let me build the barn.' And together they built something stronger than either could have made alone." Helena turned in his arms to face him. "Are we still talking about buildings?" "Maybe not entirely," Aaron admitted with a grin. That evening, Aaron did not return to his camp by the creek. Instead, with Helena's shy invitation, he stayed in the cabin. They lay together in the bed she had built, wrapped in each other's arms, and talked long into the night about their future. "I would like to combine our properties," Aaron said, "pool our resources. My cattle could graze on your land and we could work both homesteads together." "I would like that," Helena said, "but I need to know that you see me as a true partner, not just a wife to cook and clean." "Helena, I have watched you build a cabin and half a barn with your own hands. I have seen you fell trees and lay stone and design structures that stand true and strong. How could I see you as anything but an equal?" He kissed her forehead. "Besides, I am a terrible cook. If one of us stayed in the kitchen all day, it would be a waste of your skills and a danger to both of us." She laughed against his chest. "You make a good point." "I do have them occasionally," he said. They were married in Winnetka 6 weeks later, a simple ceremony at the small church with a handful of witnesses. Helena wore a dress she had sewn herself, simple but pretty, and Aaron wore his best suit, which he admitted he had only worn twice before. Mrs. Chen from the boarding house provided a cake, and the blacksmith's wife gave them a set of iron hooks for hanging pots. The town's reaction was mixed. Some of the women congratulated Helena with genuine warmth, impressed by her independence and pleased that she had found happiness. Others whispered that she had been foolish to work so hard alone, when she was just going to marry anyway. The men who had offered their dubious help before now treated Aaron with a mixture of respect and envy, wondering how the cowboy from down the mountain had succeeded where they had failed. Aaron and Helena paid the gossip no mind. They rode back up the mountain together, to the cabin she had built and the barn they had built together, and began their married life. The first winter was hard but manageable. They had laid in supplies and firewood, and the cabin proved tight against the cold. Snow fell deep in the high country, but they were well prepared. Aaron brought his cattle up to graze in Helena's meadows, and together they tended the animals through the frozen months. In the evenings, they sat by the fire, Helena sewing or mending while Aaron carved small figures from wood, a hobby he had not mentioned before. He made her a little bird, perfectly detailed, and she placed it on the mantel above the fireplace. "I am happy," Helena said one night, the words simple but profound. "I did not think I would ever say that, but I am truly happy." Aaron set down his carving and pulled her close. "So am I. You have given me something I did not know I was missing." "What is that?" "A home," he said. "Not just a place, but a real home. With you." Spring came, and with it a frenzy of activity. They planted an expanded garden, built a chicken coop, and purchased a milk cow from a rancher near Sacramento. Helena's skills as a carpenter proved invaluable time and again, and Aaron's knowledge of ranching complemented her abilities perfectly. In late spring, Helena realized she was pregnant. The news filled her with a complex mixture of joy and fear. She had never imagined herself as a mother, had never let herself want that future. But now, with Aaron beside her, the prospect seemed not just possible but wonderful. "We are going to have a baby," she told him one evening, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Aaron stared at her for a long moment, and then his face split into the widest smile she had ever seen. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around the cabin despite her laughing protests. "Careful," she said. "Put me down before you knock something over." He set her down gently, his hands coming to rest on her still flat belly. "A baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" Helena asked, needing to hear it. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Aaron said. "I am overjoyed, I am terrified. I am so grateful I can hardly breathe." "That is exactly how I feel," Helena admitted. They spent the summer preparing for the baby's arrival. Aaron built a cradle from oak, carving it with careful detail. Helena sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her stitches small and precise. They argued amiably about names, compiling lists that grew longer with each discussion. Helena's pregnancy progressed smoothly. She continued to work, though Aaron fussed over her constantly, trying to take on more of the physical labor. She appreciated his concern but refused to be treated as fragile. "I am growing a human, not dying of consumption," she told him when he tried to stop her from lifting a sack of chicken feed. "I know," he said, "but humor me. Let me worry about you." "You can worry all you want," Helena replied. "But I am still doing my share of the work." They compromised as they had learned to do in all things. Helena took on tasks that were less physically demanding but no less important, while Aaron handled the heaviest labor. In November, as the first snows began to fall, Helena went into labor. Aaron rode hard to Winnetka to fetch Mrs. Chen, who had experience as a midwife. The older woman arrived quickly, her calm competence a steadying presence in the cabin. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Aaron stayed by Helena's side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, whispering encouragement. When she was sure she could not endure another moment, Mrs. Chen told her to push, and with a final supreme effort, Helena brought her child into the world. "A boy, Mrs. Chen announced, placing the squalling infant on Helena's chest. "A healthy, strong boy." Helena looked down at her son, at his red face and waving fists, and felt a love so overwhelming it brought tears to her eyes. Aaron was crying too, she realized, his hand gentle on the baby's dark head. "He is perfect," Aaron whispered. "You are perfect. Thank you, Helena. Thank you." They named him Samuel James after both their fathers. He was a good baby, healthy and alert, and he completed their family in a way Helena had not known was possible. The years that followed were full and rich. Samuel grew into a curious, energetic toddler, following his parents around the homestead and getting into everything. Aaron proved to be a devoted father, patient and playful, while Helena discovered that motherhood suited her far better than she had anticipated. When Samuel was 2, Helena became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier and the labor shorter. Their daughter, Emily Rose, was born on a warm spring evening, small and dark-haired like her mother. Samuel was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything from feeding to diaper changes. The homestead thrived. Aaron's cattle herd grew, and Helena's garden produced abundantly. They added onto the cabin, building 2 additional rooms to accommodate their growing family. The work was familiar now, a partnership as natural as breathing. They planned together, built together, and celebrated their successes together. Helena sometimes thought back to the woman she had been when she first arrived on this mountain, so determined to do everything alone, so convinced that accepting help meant surrendering independence. She had been wrong, she realized. True independence was not about isolation. It was about having the strength to choose your own path and the wisdom to walk it beside someone who valued you as an equal. When Samuel was 5 and Emily was 3, a severe drought hit the region. Water became scarce, and many ranchers lost livestock. But Aaron and Helena's homestead, with its reliable creek and careful water management, weathered the crisis better than most. They shared water with neighbors who were struggling, earning gratitude and respect throughout the mountain communities. The children grew, and Helena made sure that both Samuel and Emily learned the skills their grandfather had taught her. She showed them how to read wood grain, how to cut and fit joints, how to build things that would last. Aaron taught them about animals and land management, about reading weather and understanding the rhythms of the natural world. "You are raising them well," Aaron said one evening, watching Samuel help his sister build a small birdhouse while Helena supervised. "We are raising them well," Helena corrected. "This is not my work or yours, it is ours." "I love you," Aaron said, as he did nearly every day. "Have I mentioned that recently?" "Not in the last hour," Helena teased. "I was beginning to worry." He pulled her close, kissing her thoroughly despite the children's giggling protests. "I love you," he said again, "and I am grateful every day that I rode up this mountain and saw what you had built." "I am grateful you offered to build the barn," Helena replied, "and that you did not listen when I tried to refuse." "You are not upset that I was stubborn, Aaron. I built a cabin alone in the wilderness because I was too stubborn to accept help I needed. I can hardly criticize you for the same quality." He laughed, the sound warm and familiar. "We are a pair, are we not?" "We are," Helena agreed, "and I would not have it any other way." More years passed, measured in seasons and growth. Samuel grew tall and strong, inheriting his father's easy way with animals and his mother's skill with tools. Emily was smaller but fierce, with a quick mind and a determination that reminded everyone of Helena. They added a 3rd child, another boy they named Thomas, who arrived when Samuel was 8. Thomas was the gentlest of the 3, with a love for growing things that made him Helena's constant companion in the garden. The homestead became known throughout the region. People came to buy cattle from Aaron and vegetables from Helena. More than one young couple sought their advice on how to build and maintain a successful ranch. Helena always told them the same thing: respect each other's strengths, work as partners, and never be too proud to ask for help when you need it. When Samuel was 16, he asked his father if he could start his own small herd, using money he had saved from working. Aaron agreed, helping his son select good breeding stock. Emily, at 14, had become an accomplished carpenter, often working alongside her mother on construction projects around the homestead and occasionally hiring out her skills to neighbors. "She is just like you," Aaron told Helena one day, watching Emily frame a small shed with confident, precise movements. "She is better than I was at that age," Helena said proudly. "She has the advantage of being taught young, rather than having to prove herself constantly." "That is because you broke down doors for her," Aaron said. "You showed this whole region that women can build and ranch and do anything men can do." Helena considered this. "I suppose I did, though I was just trying to survive at the time." "The best revolutions often start that way," Aaron said. As their children grew toward adulthood, Aaron and Helena found themselves with more time alone together. They used it well, taking rides through the mountain forests, working on projects just for the joy of creating something together, and simply sitting on the porch they had added to the cabin, watching the sun set over the Sierra Nevada. "You remember the day we met?" Helena asked one evening, her hand in Aaron's as they watched the sky turn gold and pink. "I remember being stunned that someone had actually built that cabin alone," Aaron said. "And I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, even covered in sawdust and looking at me like you might shoot me." Helena laughed. "I was not going to shoot you." "I was not entirely certain of that at the time," Aaron admitted. "You were rather fierce." "I was protecting myself," Helena said. "I had learned that I needed to." "I know," Aaron said, squeezing her hand. "And I am honored that you eventually trusted me enough to let me pass those walls." "Best decision I ever made," Helena said softly, "saying yes when you asked to build the barn." "Everything good in my life came from that choice. Everything good in my life came from riding up this mountain and meeting you," Aaron replied. "I love you, Helena, more now than ever." "More now than ever," she echoed, "even when I am old and gray." "Your hair has been going gray for years," Aaron pointed out. "And yes, even then, even always." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge. Below them, they could hear their children's voices, Samuel and Emily arguing about something while Thomas laughed. The sounds of family, of home. Samuel married at 20, bringing his wife Rachel to live on the homestead. She was a kind woman, practical and hardworking, and she fit into the family as if she had always been there. When Samuel and Rachel's first child was born, a daughter they named Helena after her grandmother, Helena Turner Lawson, held her namesake and cried. "I never imagined this," she told Aaron that night. "When I was building my cabin, alone and determined to stay that way, I never imagined I would have this. Children, grandchildren, a life so full of love." "You built more than a cabin," Aaron said. "You built a legacy." Emily chose not to marry, instead focusing on her carpentry business, which had grown to include contracts throughout the region. She built homes and barns and commercial buildings, earning a reputation for quality work and fair dealing. Helena supported her daughter's choice completely, understanding the satisfaction that came from building something with your own hands and calling it yours. Thomas, gentlest of their children, married a schoolteacher named Margaret. They settled on a portion of the homestead, building their own house with Emily's help and Helena's supervision. Thomas continued to manage the gardens and orchards, expanding them into a thriving operation that supplied produce to Winnetka and surrounding towns. The homestead that Helena had started with 40 acres and a dream had grown into a family compound, a place where multiple generations lived and worked together. The cabin she had built still stood at the center of it all, solid and true after more than 30 years. Aaron had added onto it over the years, but the original structure remained, a testament to one woman's determination and skill. Helena was 55 when Aaron fell ill. It started as a cough that would not go away, and despite Helena's nursing and the doctor's best efforts, he grew steadily weaker. They both knew what was coming, though neither wanted to say it aloud. "I am not ready to lose you," Helena said one night, lying beside him in the bed they had shared for over 3 decades. "I am not ready to go," Aaron replied, his voice weak. "But Helena, listen to me. You are the strongest person I have ever known. You will be all right." "I do not want to be all right without you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I want you here. I know, my love, I know." He lifted a trembling hand to her face, wiping away her tears. "But you have our children, our grandchildren. You have this place we built together. You have everything we made, and you have the knowledge that I loved you every single day of our life together." "It is not enough," Helena whispered. "It has to be," Aaron said gently. "It is all we get." He died 3 days later with Helena holding his hand and their children gathered around. He was 58 years old and he had lived a good life, but it felt far too short. Helena thought she might shatter from the grief. For weeks, she moved through her days in a fog, performing necessary tasks but feeling hollow inside. Her children worried about her, but Emily, who understood her mother best, knew what she needed. "Come help me with the Miller barn," Emily said one morning. "I need someone to supervise the framing." Helena almost refused, but something in her daughter's eyes made her reconsider. She went, and she found that working with her hands, building something solid and real, helped ease the ache in her chest. It did not eliminate the grief, but it made it bearable. Over the following months, Helena slowly found her way back to herself. She would never stop missing Aaron, would never stop wishing for one more day, one more conversation, one more sunset watched together. But she learned to carry the grief alongside the joy of their years together. She threw herself into teaching her grandchildren the skills she and Aaron had valued. Young Helena, Samuel's daughter, showed particular aptitude for ranching, and her grandfather would have been proud. Emily's nieces and nephews learned carpentry at both their aunt's and grandmother's hands. Thomas's children inherited his love of growing things. Helena was 60 when the territorial governor visited Winnetka as part of a tour of the region. He had heard about the woman who had homesteaded alone and built a thriving ranch with her cowboy husband. He wanted to meet her, to hear her story firsthand. She received him on the porch of her cabin, this woman who had once avoided all attention and now stood comfortably in her own authority. She told him about building the cabin alone, about Aaron offering to help with the barn, about their partnership and their life together. "You are an inspiration," the governor said. "Your story should be told, should be remembered." "My story is not unusual," Helena replied. "It is the story of countless women who built homes and lives in this wild country. I simply happened to be stubborn enough to do it alone at first, and lucky enough to find a partner who understood that independence and love are not opposites." The governor's visit brought attention Helena neither wanted nor needed, but it had one positive effect. Young women from across the territory wrote to her, asking advice, seeking encouragement. Helena answered every letter, always with the same message: "You are stronger than you know, and accepting help does not diminish your strength." Helena lived another 12 years, dying peacefully in her sleep at the age of 72. She was surrounded by 3 generations of family, in the cabin she had built with her own hands, on the land she had claimed and tamed and loved. At her funeral, Emily spoke about her mother's legacy. "She taught us that strength comes in many forms, that building something with your hands is sacred work. That independence means choosing your own path, not walking it alone. And that love, real love, is a partnership of equals." They buried Helena next to Aaron on a hill overlooking the homestead, where they could see everything they had built together. The cabin still stood solid and true. The barn they had raised together still sheltered animals and stored hay. The land they had worked supported children and grandchildren who carried their values forward. Samuel, now in his 50s, stood with his arm around his daughter Helena as they looked out over the homestead after the service. "She built her cabin by herself," he said softly. And when the cowboy said, "Let me build the barn," she was brave enough to let him. Together they built something that will last long after we are all gone. Young Helena, named for her grandmother, looked up at her father. "I want to build something too," she said, "something that lasts." "You will," Samuel assured her. "Your grandmother would expect nothing less." The seasons continued their eternal cycle. Snow fell and melted, crops grew and were harvested, cattle grazed the meadows Helena had first cleared more than 50 years before. The cabin stood at the center of it all, a monument to one woman's determination, and the love she had been brave enough to accept. People passing through still pointed it out. The Turner Lawson homestead, founded by a woman who built her cabin alone and a cowboy who offered to build the barn. The story became legend, but at its heart was a simple truth. That love and partnership, built on mutual respect and shared dreams, create foundations strong enough to last generations. Emily continued her carpentry business well into her 70s, always teaching young women the skills her mother had taught her. She never married, but she built homes for dozens of families, creating shelter and beauty with her skilled hands. When people asked if she regretted not having a family of her own, she always smiled and said, "I have exactly the life I chose, and I learned from my mother that is all anyone can ask for." Thomas's orchards and gardens became renowned throughout California, his gentle stewardship of the land producing abundance year after year. He taught his children that working with the earth required patience and respect, lessons learned from parents who had understood that building a life meant nurturing growth. Samuel's daughter Helena eventually took over management of the cattle operation, becoming one of the most respected ranchers in the territory. She married a man who respected her skills and worked beside her as an equal, and together they continued the legacy her grandparents had started. The cabin itself became a gathering place for the family, the heart of the homestead where everyone returned for holidays and celebrations. Great-grandchildren played in the same rooms where their ancestors had been born. The bed Helena had built with her own hands was carefully preserved, a piece of family history too precious to discard. On the mantel above the fireplace, now nearly 80 years old, sat the small carved bird Aaron had made for Helena during their first winter together. Generations of children had been told the story of how it came to be there, how a cowboy's simple gift had been the first of thousands of small kindnesses that built a love strong enough to weather any storm. The barn still stood too, expanded and modified over the years, but still solid at its core. It had been built by two people learning to work together, learning to trust each other, learning that sometimes the strongest structures are those built by many hands working in harmony. Visitors to the homestead, whether family or curious strangers drawn by the legend, always asked the same question: what made Helena Turner special? What made her story worth remembering? The answer, those who knew the family said, was simple. Helena had not been special because she was stronger or smarter or braver than other women of her time. She had been special because she had been honest about her struggles, honest about her fears, and brave enough to accept help when it was offered with genuine respect and love. She had built her cabin alone because she needed to prove to herself that she could. And she had let Aaron build the barn beside her because she was wise enough to know that proving yourself and building a life are two different things. In the end, Helena Turner Lawson's legacy was not just the structure she had built or the land she had tamed. It was the lesson she taught through her life. That independence and interdependence are not opposites, that strength can be found in vulnerability, and that love, when built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared purpose, creates something far more lasting than any cabin or barn. The sun still rises over the Sierra Nevada foothills, painting the sky gold above the homestead where it all began. The cabin stands solid and true, its logs still tight after more than a century, a testament to skill and determination. The barn beside it, weathered but strong, speaks of partnership and love, and if you listen carefully on quiet evenings, the descendants say, you can almost hear them still. The sound of a saw cutting clean through wood, the ring of hammer on nail, laughter drifting up from the creek. And two voices, one man and one woman, planning their next project, dreaming their next dream, building their life together one board at a time. She built her cabin by herself with no help, proving to herself and the world that she could. The cowboy said, "Let me build the barn," offering partnership instead of charity, respect instead of control. Together they built something neither could have made alone. A love that lasted a lifetime, a family that spanned generations, and a legacy that would endure as long as the mountains themselves.